The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Prince William sat in his study, staring at the medical report that would change everything. The words blurred together on the page, but one phrase kept jumping out at him. Advanced stage. His hands trembled as he set the document down, the weight of the news settling heavily on his shoulders. Kate had been feeling unwell for months. What started as simple fatigue had gradually worsened into something far more serious. The doctors had run test after test, each one bringing more concern than answers. Now finally they had their diagnosis, and it was worse than either of them had imagined. The door to his study creaked open, and Kate appeared in the doorway. She looked pale, her usual radiant smile replaced by an expression of quiet determination. She had already spoken with the doctors privately, already knew what the report contained. The couple had faced many challenges together during their years in the public eye, but nothing had prepared them for this moment. "We need to tell the children," Kate said softly, stepping into the room. Her voice was steady, but William could see the fear hiding behind her brave facade. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were still so young, still believed their parents were invincible. How do you explain to children that sometimes even princes and princesses face battles they might not win? William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where their children often played. The irony wasn't lost on him that in a world where they were constantly surrounded by people, in this moment, they felt completely alone. The weight of the crown, the expectations of a nation, the constant scrutiny of the media, none of it had prepared them for this deeply personal crisis. The couple spent the next hour in quiet conversation, holding hands as they discussed treatment options, timelines, and the impossible decisions that lay ahead. Kate would need to undergo intensive treatment immediately, which meant stepping back from her royal duties indefinitely. The thought of disappointing the countless charities and organizations that depended on her support brought tears to her eyes. "The children's hospital opening next week," she whispered, thinking of the young patients who had been so excited to meet her. The literacy program launch, the mental health summit. Each canceled engagement felt like a small betrayal of the people who needed their support most. William squeezed her hand tighter. "None of that matters right now," he said firmly. "You matter. Our family matters. Everything else can wait." But even as he spoke the words, they both knew the reality was more complicated. The royal family couldn't simply pause their responsibilities, not when the nation looked to them for stability and continuity. As the morning wore on, palace staff began to notice something was different. The usual bustle of activity had slowed to a whisper. Meetings were quietly canceled, schedules were cleared, and the normally open curtains in the private quarters remained drawn. The household staff, many of whom had worked for the royal family for decades, recognized the signs of a family in crisis. Kate's private secretary knocked gently on the study door, carrying a stack of correspondence that needed attention. When she entered and saw the couple's tear-stained faces, she immediately understood that everything had changed. Without a word, she set the papers aside and quietly retreated, knowing that whatever official business awaited could wait for another day. The afternoon brought a parade of specialists, treatment coordinators, and medical advisors. Each conversation brought new terminology, new timelines, new uncertainties. Kate listened carefully to each expert, asking detailed questions about side effects, success rates, and what to expect in the coming months. Her background in art history hadn't prepared her for medical jargon, but her determination to understand every aspect of her condition was unwavering. William found himself taking pages of notes, trying to process information that seemed to change by the hour. One doctor spoke of promising new treatments, while another emphasized the importance of managing expectations. The conflicting advice left him feeling more confused than informed, but he pressed on, determined to understand every option available to his wife. As evening approached, the couple finally found themselves alone again. The children were with their nanny, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change. Kate curled up next to William on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder as they both contemplated the uncertain road ahead. "Do you remember our wedding day?" Kate asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Standing there in Westminster Abbey, promising in sickness and in health? I never imagined we'd face the sickness part so soon." William closed his eyes, remembering the joy and optimism of that day. when their future had seemed so bright and certain. The palace walls that had always provided privacy and protection now felt like barriers keeping them isolated from the world. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations with family members, palace officials, and eventually the public. But tonight they simply held each other, two people facing the unknown together, drawing strength from a love that had already weathered so many storms. 3 weeks had passed since the diagnosis, and the palace had become a fortress of carefully managed information. Kate's treatment had begun immediately, and the side effects were taking their toll. The vibrant woman who had charmed world leaders and comforted grieving families now spent most days in bed, fighting waves of nausea and exhaustion that left her barely recognizable to herself. William had quietly canceled all non-essential engagements, citing family commitments that fooled no one in the inner circle, but kept the media speculation at bay. He spent his mornings handling urgent royal business from his home office, then dedicated the rest of each day to being present for Kate and the children. The carefully maintained balance of public duty and private life had completely shifted toward family. The children had been told that their mother was sick and needed special medicine that would make her very tired. Prince George, at his young age, seemed to understand more than he let on, often bringing his mother drawings and sitting quietly beside her bed. Princess Charlotte had become unusually clingy, rarely leaving Kate's side when she was awake. Little Prince Louis continued his usual energetic play, but even he seemed to sense that something important had changed in their household. Kate's medical team had set up a private treatment room in the palace, allowing her to receive care without the constant travel to hospitals that would inevitably attract media attention. The room, once a rarely used guest bedroom, had been transformed into a medical facility, complete with specialized equipment and a team of nurses who worked around the clock. The sterile smell of antiseptic had replaced the usual floral arrangements that brightened the palace corridors. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Kate's primary oncologist, had become a daily presence in their lives. A brilliant woman in her 50s with a reputation for both medical excellence and compassionate care, she had agreed to provide private treatment while maintaining the highest level of confidentiality. Her reassuring presence had become a lifeline for both William and Kate as they navigated the complex world of treatment protocols and medical decisions. The early response is encouraging, Dr. Mitchell explained during one of her evening consultations. Kate's body is responding well to the treatment, but we're still in the early stages. The next few months will be critical. William hung on every word, searching for signs of hope while preparing himself for the possibility of disappointment. Kate's appetite had nearly disappeared, and William found himself coaxing her to eat small portions throughout the day. He learned to prepare simple foods that might appeal to her changing tastes, a skill he'd never needed during his privileged upbringing. The act of caring for her in such basic ways brought them closer together, stripping away the formality that often surrounded their public lives. The palace staff had rallied around the family with remarkable discretion and dedication. The head chef prepared special meals designed to help Kate maintain her strength, while the household manager ensured that the family's privacy remained absolutely protected. Even the security detail had been briefed on the need for additional sensitivity, understanding that their role now extended beyond protection to preserving the family's emotional well-being. Princess Anne had become a frequent visitor, bringing a practical perspective that both William and Kate appreciated. As someone who had navigated decades of royal duty while maintaining fierce independence, Anne understood the unique pressures they faced. She often sat with Kate in comfortable silence, or engaged William in discussions about managing royal responsibilities during personal crises. King Charles had initially struggled with how to balance his new role as monarch with his desire to support his son's family. The weight of royal tradition suggested maintaining public duties regardless of personal circumstances, but his father's heart wanted to clear his schedule and focus entirely on Kate's recovery. After several difficult conversations with palace advisors, he had found a middle ground that allowed him to maintain essential royal functions while being present for his family when needed. The secrecy surrounding Kate's condition had created an atmosphere of tension throughout the palace. Staff members who had worked closely with the Princess of Wales for years could see the obvious changes but were sworn to absolute confidentiality. The usual stream of official photographs and public appearances had stopped abruptly, leading to increased media speculation about Kate's whereabouts and activities. Palace Communications Director James Harrison found himself crafting increasingly creative explanations for Kate's absence from scheduled events. The princess is taking a brief break to focus on family commitments had become the standard response, but the media's questions were becoming more persistent and specific. Harrison knew that eventually, they would need to provide more substantial answers, but for now, protecting the family's privacy remained the priority. William's brother Harry had reached out multiple times, offering support. Despite the geographical distance and recent family tensions, the conversations were awkward at first, weighted down by years of unresolved conflicts, but the gravity of Kate's situation had a way of putting past disagreements into perspective. Harry's own experience with family crisis and media pressure made his advice particularly valuable, even if their relationship remained complicated. Late at night, when the children were asleep and the palace had grown quiet, William often found himself walking the corridors alone, trying to process the overwhelming changes in their lives. The portraits of previous monarchs and their families looked down from the walls, reminding him of the countless personal tragedies that had played out within these same rooms throughout history. The continuity was both comforting and sobering. Kate's determination to maintain some normalcy for the children had become both inspiring and heartbreaking to witness. On her better days, she would insist on reading bedtime stories or helping with homework, even when she could barely keep her eyes open. Her maternal instincts remained strong even as her physical strength wavered, a testament to the fierce love that had always defined her approach to motherhood. 2 months into Kate's treatment, the impossible had become routine. The palace had developed a rhythm around her medical needs, with nurses changing shifts seamlessly and specialists arriving for consultations without fanfare. William had become an expert at reading the subtle signs that indicated whether Kate was having a good day or a difficult one, adjusting the family's activities accordingly. The media pressure had intensified significantly. Photographers with long lenses had been spotted near the palace grounds, hoping to catch a glimpse of Kate that might confirm the growing rumors about her health. Social media speculation had reached a fever pitch, with conspiracy theories ranging from the ridiculous to the surprisingly accurate. Palace security had increased patrols, but they couldn't control the telephoto lenses positioned on nearby buildings. Dr. Mitchell had delivered mixed news during her latest consultation. While Kate's body continued to respond to treatment, the aggressive nature of the therapy was taking a severe toll on her overall health. She had lost considerable weight, her famous hair had begun to thin dramatically, and her energy levels remained critically low. The treatment that was fighting her disease was also fighting her strength. "We're at a crossroads," Dr. Mitchell explained to William and Kate during a particularly difficult conversation. "We can continue with the current protocol, which is showing results but causing significant side effects, or we can explore alternative approaches that might be gentler but potentially less effective." The choice felt impossible. Risk Kate's immediate well-being for a better long-term outcome, or prioritize her current quality of life with uncertain results. Kate had surprised everyone with her response. Despite the physical toll, she insisted on continuing with the most aggressive treatment available. "I need to be here for my children," she said firmly, her voice hoarse but determined. "Whatever it takes, for as long as it takes." William admired her courage even as he worried about the cost of such determination. The children had begun to show signs of stress despite everyone's efforts to maintain normalcy. George had become unusually serious for his age, often asking detailed questions about his mother's medicine and when she would feel better. Charlotte had started having nightmares, creeping into her parents' room in the middle of the night to make sure Kate was still breathing. Louis, too young to fully understand, had simply become more demanding of his mother's attention whenever she was awake. William's own emotional state was becoming increasingly fragile. He had always been the strong one in their relationship, the steady presence that Kate could lean on during difficult times. But watching the woman he loved suffer while maintaining a brave face for their children and the world was taking a toll he hadn't anticipated. He found himself losing his temper over minor issues, then feeling guilty about his lack of control. The palace had quietly reached out to other royal families who had faced similar health crises, seeking advice on managing both the medical and public relations aspects of Kate's situation. Queen Letizia of Spain, who had supported her husband through his own health challenges, provided valuable insights about maintaining royal duties while prioritizing family needs. The network of royal support, usually focused on ceremonial matters, had become a lifeline of practical wisdom. Kate's parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, had become constant presences at the palace. Carol, in particular, had taken on much of the day-to-day care for the grandchildren, allowing William to focus on Kate's needs without worrying about the children's routines. Her practical, no-nonsense approach had brought a sense of normalcy to the household that everyone desperately needed. The Queen Consort Camilla had emerged as an unexpected source of strength for the family. Her own experience with the pressures of royal life, combined with her background in health advocacy, made her uniquely qualified to offer support. She often visited in the evenings, bringing books and magazines that might distract Kate during her more difficult days, or simply sitting quietly while Kate rested. Palace staff had begun to show signs of strain as well. Many had worked for the royal family for years and had developed genuine affection for Kate. Seeing her suffer while maintaining absolute discretion about her condition created an emotional burden that affected everyone from security guards to kitchen staff. The usual cheerful atmosphere of the working palace had been replaced by a subdued tension that everyone felt but no one could openly acknowledge. William had started seeing a therapist privately, something that would have been unthinkable for a royal family member just a generation earlier. The sessions, conducted in complete secrecy, provided him with tools for managing his stress and anxiety while supporting Kate through her treatment. The irony that he was receiving mental health support while publicly championing mental health awareness wasn't lost on him. The international community had begun to take notice of Kate's extended absence from public life. Commonwealth leaders who had worked closely with her on various initiatives were asking discreet questions about her availability for upcoming events. The palace's vague responses had satisfied most official inquiries, but the diplomatic community was starting to piece together the reality of the situation. Kate's charitable work, which had been such a significant part of her identity as Princess of Wales, remained on indefinite hold. The organizations she supported had been understanding, but the impact of her absence was becoming more apparent as months passed. Children's hospitals missed her visits, literacy programs lacked her high-profile support, and mental health initiatives lost their most visible advocate. On her better days, Kate insisted on reading the letters that continued to arrive from around the world. Well-wishers sent cards, children drew pictures, and supporters shared their own stories of overcoming adversity. These messages, while touching, also served as reminders of the public role she was unable to fulfill. Each letter represented someone who looked to her for inspiration and support that she currently couldn't provide. The financial implications of Kate's treatment were something the family didn't need to worry about, but William was acutely aware of the families facing similar medical crises without their resources. This awareness had sparked conversations about establishing a fund to support other families dealing with serious illness, though such plans would have to wait until Kate's own situation stabilized. 4 months into the treatment, the palace could no longer maintain the facade that nothing had changed. Major news outlets had begun investigating Kate's prolonged absence, and despite the royal family's legendary ability to control information, cracks were starting to show. Anonymous sources within the medical community had started leaking hints about a significant health matter affecting a senior royal, and social media detectives were piecing together flight logs of medical helicopters and specialist doctors visiting the palace. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when a respected royal correspondent published a carefully worded article questioning whether the public had a right to know about Kate's condition. The piece stopped short of making specific claims, but laid out a timeline of canceled appearances and suspicious scheduling changes that painted a clear picture for anyone paying attention. Within hours, the story had been picked up by international media outlets, each adding their own speculation and analysis. William and Kate knew they couldn't delay the inevitable much longer. The palace communications team had prepared several different statements for various scenarios, ranging from a brief acknowledgement of health issues to a detailed explanation of Kate's diagnosis and treatment. The choice of how much to reveal would ultimately rest with Kate herself, a decision that carried enormous weight for both her privacy and the monarchy's transparency. Dr. Mitchell had delivered encouraging news during their latest consultation. Kate's most recent scans showed significant improvement, and her blood work indicated that the treatment was successfully targeting the disease. However, she cautioned that they were still months away from declaring any kind of victory, and Kate's recovery would be a long process requiring continued intensive care and monitoring. "I want to tell our story ourselves," Kate announced during a family meeting that included William, her parents, and key palace advisors. Her voice was stronger than it had been in months, though she still tired easily and needed frequent rest breaks. "If we're going to lose control of the narrative anyway, I'd rather people hear the truth from us than speculation from others." The decision to go public required careful orchestration. Palace Communications Director James Harrison worked around the clock to craft a statement that would satisfy public curiosity while maintaining appropriate boundaries around Kate's medical privacy. The timing would be crucial. Releasing the information at the right moment could control the story's impact, while poor timing could lead to a media frenzy that would be impossible to manage. William had grown increasingly protective of his family's privacy, but he understood Kate's reasoning. Their silence had created a vacuum that was being filled with rumors and conspiracy theories, some of which were beginning to affect the monarchy's reputation. A controlled revelation of the truth might actually provide more privacy in the long run by satisfying public curiosity and reducing media speculation. The children had been prepared for the possibility that their mother's illness might become public knowledge. George, in particular, had asked thoughtful questions about what this would mean for their family and whether they would face more attention from photographers and reporters. William and Kate had tried to explain that while more people might know about their mother's condition, it wouldn't change their daily lives or the love and support surrounding them. Kate's treatment team had been consulted about the potential impact of public disclosure on her recovery. Dr. Mitchell expressed concern that media attention might create additional stress that could affect Kate's healing, but she also acknowledged that the current secrecy was creating its own form of pressure. The medical team agreed to increase security protocols and limit access to information that might be shared publicly. The broader royal family had mixed reactions to the decision to go public. King Charles supported William and Kate's choice, understanding the impossible position they faced between privacy and public duty. However, some family members worried about setting a precedent that future health issues would need to be disclosed, potentially affecting the monarchy's ability to maintain any private sphere. Palace staff had been briefed on the upcoming announcement and prepared for the inevitable increase in media attention. Security protocols were enhanced, communication systems were streamlined, and additional support staff were brought in to handle the expected surge in public correspondence and media inquiries. The palace, which had operated in relative quiet for months, prepared for a return to intense scrutiny. Kate spent considerable time crafting her own words for the public statement. She wanted to acknowledge the support she had received while maintaining dignity and hope for other families facing similar challenges. Her background in communication served her well as she found ways to be honest about her struggles without being overly dramatic or seeking sympathy. The international implications of Kate's disclosure were significant. As a future queen and current Princess of Wales, her health was considered a matter of public interest in dozens of Commonwealth countries. Diplomatic channels had been quietly informed of the planned announcement to prevent any diplomatic incidents or misunderstandings about the royal family's priorities and capabilities. William's role as heir to the throne added another layer of complexity to their situation. His need to balance support for Kate with his royal duties had become increasingly difficult to maintain. Some constitutional experts had quietly discussed the possibility of adjusting the line of succession temporarily if William needed to step back from public duties, though such discussions remained purely theoretical. The media training that both William and Kate had received over the years had prepared them for many scenarios, but nothing had specifically addressed how to handle a life-threatening illness while maintaining royal protocol. They found themselves creating new precedents for how the modern monarchy could balance transparency with privacy during personal crises. Kate's charitable organizations had been informed of the upcoming announcement and were prepared to offer support and understanding. Many of these groups worked with families facing medical crises and were uniquely positioned to provide both practical assistance and emotional support. To the royal family during this difficult period, the night before the announcement, William and Kate sat together in their private sitting room, reviewing the final version of the statement one last time. The words seemed inadequate to capture the fear, hope, love, and determination that had defined their experience over the past months. But they represented a step toward reclaiming control of their story and moving forward with honesty and dignity. The morning of the announcement dawned gray and drizzling, as if the London weather reflected the gravity of what was about to unfold. At precisely 10 a.m., palace officials released a carefully crafted statement revealing Kate's diagnosis and treatment journey. Within minutes, the news had spread across every major media platform in the world, generating an immediate outpouring of support and sympathy that surprised even the most experienced royal watchers. The statement was brief, but honest. Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales has been receiving treatment for cancer following a diagnosis earlier this year. The princess and her family are grateful for the exceptional care she has received and for the privacy that has been respected during this difficult time. The princess looks forward to returning to her official duties when her health permits. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms filled with messages of support using hashtags like #BuyerGetWellKate and Prayers for Catherine. Flowers began appearing at palace gates within hours, and the palace switchboard was flooded with calls from well-wishers around the world. The outpouring of love and concern demonstrated the deep affection that people felt for Kate, transcending national boundaries and political differences. William watched the news coverage from Kate's bedside, holding her hand as reporters discussed their family's private struggle with millions of viewers. It felt surreal to see their most intimate battle become global news, but the overwhelming positivity of the response provided some comfort. For the first time in months, they didn't feel alone in their fight. The children had been prepared for the attention, but seeing their mother's photograph on television screens around the world still came as a shock. George asked why everyone was talking about their family, and William struggled to find age-appropriate words to explain the unique position they held in the public consciousness. The balance between being a normal family and being royals had never felt more complicated. International leaders began reaching out with messages of support. Presidents, prime ministers, and monarchs from around the world expressed their concern and offered prayers for Kate's recovery. Queen Elizabeth II of Sweden, who had faced her own health challenges, sent a particularly touching personal note sharing her experience and offering encouragement. The global royal network that often focused on ceremony and protocol had become a source of genuine emotional support. Dr. Mitchell found herself fielding calls from medical colleagues around the world who wanted to offer their expertise or collaborate on Kate's treatment. The publicity had unwittingly connected them with specialists and researchers who might not have been aware of Kate's case otherwise. While maintaining strict patient confidentiality, Dr. Mitchell was able to explore additional treatment options that might benefit not only Kate, but other patients facing similar diagnoses. The palace had prepared for increased media attention, but the scale of international interest exceeded all expectations. Camera crews from dozens of countries set up permanent positions outside the palace gates, and royal correspondents who had covered lighter stories for years found themselves reporting on life and death matters. The tone of coverage was respectful, with most outlets focusing on Kate's courage and the family's strength rather than sensationalizing their struggle. Kate's first public appearance since the announcement was carefully planned and deeply meaningful. She chose to visit the children's cancer ward at a London hospital, wanting to show support for young patients who were fighting battles similar to her own. The visit, which lasted only 30 minutes due to her limited stamina, generated some of the most powerful images of her royal career. Her connection with the young patients was genuine and unguarded, creating moments of shared understanding that transcended her royal status. The photograph that would later become iconic was taken almost by accident. As Kate was leaving the hospital, a young patient named Emma, who was 7 years old and undergoing her own cancer treatment, broke away from her parents and ran to give Kate a spontaneous hug. The image of the Princess of Wales wearing a colorful headscarf to cover her own treatment-related hair loss, embracing the young girl with tears streaming down both their faces, captured the essence of shared human experience in the face of serious illness. William had initially worried about Kate's decision to make the hospital visit so soon after going public with her diagnosis. Her doctors had cleared the visit medically, but he was concerned about the emotional toll of being in public while still feeling vulnerable. However, seeing Kate's face light up as she connected with the young patients convinced him that she had made the right choice. The visit seemed to energize her in a way that rest and medical treatment alone couldn't achieve. The hospital visit also provided an opportunity for Kate to address the public directly for the first time since her diagnosis. Standing outside the hospital with William by her side, she spoke briefly to the gathered media. Her voice was soft but clear as she thanked everyone for their support and emphasized the importance of funding cancer research for children. The image of her speaking, while clearly weak but determined, became another defining moment of her journey. The media coverage of the hospital visit was overwhelmingly positive, but it also raised questions about the pressure on public figures to perform their duties even while dealing with serious personal challenges. Some commentators praised Kate's dedication, while others worried that she was setting an unrealistic standard for others facing similar health battles. The palace clarified that all future public appearances would be entirely dependent on Kate's health and energy levels. Behind the scenes, the family was still adjusting to their new reality. The public nature of Kate's battle had brought support, but also scrutiny to every aspect of their lives. Photographers tracked their movements more closely, medical appointments required additional security, and even simple family outings became complicated logistics exercises. Kate's relationship with her own mortality had deepened through her treatment, giving her a perspective on life that influenced every decision she made. She began writing letters to her children to be opened at future milestones, a project that was both heartbreaking and healing. William found her working on these letters one evening and was moved to tears by her determination to be present for her children's futures, even if she couldn't physically be there. The charitable foundation that William and Kate had established years earlier was refocused to include significant funding for cancer research and support for families dealing with serious illness. Kate's personal experience had given her insights into the gaps in support systems that even well-resourced families faced during medical crises. The foundation's new direction would ensure that her battle could help other families facing similar challenges. 6 months after her diagnosis, Kate stood in the same palace study where she and William had first processed the devastating news that changed their lives forever. The morning sun streamed through the windows just as it had that terrible day, but everything else had transformed. The latest medical reports showed clear signs of remission, and Dr. Mitchell had cautiously used the word recovery for the first time in their conversations. The physical changes in Kate were dramatic but no longer frightening. Her hair was growing back in soft waves, different from its original texture but beautiful in its own way. She had regained most of the weight she had lost during treatment, and her energy levels, while not yet back to their previous heights, allowed her to participate fully in family life again. Most importantly, the shadow of fear that had haunted her eyes for months had been replaced by a quiet confidence that she would be there for her children's futures. William had also been transformed by the experience. The man who had always carried himself with the controlled composure expected of future kings had learned to embrace vulnerability and emotional honesty. His relationship with Kate had deepened in ways that years of normal married life might never have achieved. They had faced the possibility of loss together and emerged stronger, more connected, and more grateful for each ordinary day. The children had adapted to their new normal with the resilience that often surprises adults. George had developed a sophisticated understanding of illness and recovery that made him unusually empathetic for his age. Charlotte had overcome her nightmares and now spoke proudly about her mother's bravery to anyone who would listen. Louis, who had been too young to fully understand the crisis, simply basked in having his mother's full attention and energy returned to him. The moment that would become known as the hug that moved the world happened entirely spontaneously during what was meant to be a routine public appearance. Kate had gradually returned to a limited schedule of royal duties, carefully chosen engagements that wouldn't overtax her recovering strength, but would allow her to reconnect with the causes she cared about. Most, the event was a celebration of a new children's cancer research facility that had received significant funding from their charitable foundation. Kate had insisted on attending despite her doctor's concerns about her stamina. The facility represented hope for future families who would face the journey that her own family had just completed, and she felt a personal obligation to be present for its opening. As Kate toured the state-of-the-art treatment rooms and research laboratories, she was introduced to families whose children were currently undergoing treatment. The conversations were emotional but uplifting, filled with the kind of hope that can only come from seeing someone who has successfully navigated the same frightening path they were currently walking. The moment occurred as Kate was preparing to leave the facility. 8-year-old Marcus, who had been receiving treatment for 2 years and had followed Kate's public journey closely, approached her with his parents. He had prepared a drawing for her, a picture of a princess with a crown who was also wearing a superhero cape. "This is you," he explained seriously, "because you're brave like superheroes are." Kate knelt down to Marcus's eye level to properly examine his artwork, and as she looked at the drawing, she was overwhelmed by the representation of how her struggle had inspired this young boy, who was fighting his own battle. Tears began streaming down her face as she realized the profound impact that sharing her vulnerability had created for children like Marcus who needed to see that even princesses could get sick and get better. Marcus, seeing Kate's tears, didn't hesitate. He dropped his drawing and wrapped his small arms around her neck in a fierce hug. "It's okay," he whispered in her ear. "We're both going to be fine." In that moment, Kate completely lost her composure, sobbing as she held this brave little boy who was comforting her instead of the other way around. William, who had been speaking with hospital administrators nearby, turned to see his wife and the young boy locked in their emotional embrace. The sight hit him with unexpected force. Seeing Kate vulnerable but no longer fragile, seeing her connect with this child who represented hope and resilience, seeing the beautiful completion of a journey that had started with so much fear and uncertainty. Unable to control his own emotions, William approached and knelt beside Kate and Marcus, placing his arms around both of them. The three figures, the future king and queen and a young cancer patient, created an image that photographers captured from a respectful distance, but that would resonate around the world as a symbol of shared human experience transcending social boundaries. The embrace lasted several minutes, with other families and medical staff forming a respectful circle around them. Many of the adults present found themselves in tears, moved by the raw emotion and genuine connection they were witnessing. The usual formality of royal visits had completely disappeared, replaced by authentic human interaction that reminded everyone present why they were doing this important work. When they finally separated, Kate held Marcus's face in her hands and made him a promise. "I'm going to make sure that children like you have the best doctors and the best medicine available," she said, "and I'm going to tell everyone how brave you are." Marcus nodded solemnly, understanding that this was a commitment from someone who would keep her word. The aftermath of that moment reshaped Kate's role as Princess of Wales. The image of the tearful embrace became one of the most shared photographs in royal history, but more importantly, it marked a new chapter in her public service. She had found her voice as someone who had personally experienced the healthcare system she was now advocating to improve, bringing authenticity to her charitable work that hadn't existed before. The 6 months that followed saw Kate emerge as a powerful advocate for cancer research funding, patient support services, and healthcare accessibility. Her personal experience had given her insights that complemented her natural compassion, creating a platform for advocacy that was both emotionally compelling and practically informed. William and Kate's marriage had been tested by circumstances they never could have imagined, but it had emerged stronger and more purposeful. They had learned that their public roles could be enhanced rather than diminished by sharing their vulnerabilities, and that authentic human connection was more powerful than any royal protocol. As they stood together in that palace study where their journey had begun, Kate reached for William's hand just as she had on that first terrible morning. This time, however, their clasped hands represented not fear and uncertainty, but gratitude for a future they had almost lost, and determination to use their platform to help others facing similar battles. The world had indeed wept with them, but more importantly, it had learned to hope alongside them as well.